Up next, it's our chance in the program where we like to turn our attention over to the grain markets. And this week, the U.S. Department of Agriculture had a big data dump to start the week. We had the annual Prospective plantings report as well as the quarterly stocks report. Heartland Farm Partners President Jeff Peterson joined us earlier this week to go through all of this data and explain what it means for the markets here moving forward. Here's our conversation from Tuesday. Joining us today on Market Journal to discuss the markets is Jeff Peterson. He is the president of Heartland Farm Partners. And Jeff, what a week it is that you joined us here on the show. We're going to focus our conversation around activity early in the week when USDA released a couple of reports. The first is the Prospective plantings report. Surveyed farmers all across the country. They gave their information back to USDA. They published the number of 95.3 million acres of corn set to be planted, 83.5 million acres of soybeans. Your thoughts on that report and those numbers?
Yeah, it was really interesting to see. Interesting to see how the numbers came out, but then how the market traded it. If you look back at that 95.3, that's up 4.7 million acres from where we would have been last year. But if you really dig back into the numbers, what you would actually find is that rotationally, we actually are just kind of going back to a little bit more than we would have been a couple of years ago. So that was really no big surprise. And then you come over there on the bean side, 83.5 million acres on the beans. That number's down 3.5 million acres from where it would have been last year. And with everything we've seen, it started really with last fall. If you think about kind of that switch from acres that were going to go from beans over to corn because of the yields and the uncertainty about how soybeans are going to yield. And then you throw in the prices where we're at and the profitability discussions that are out there. So really, I really agree with where the numbers are out there, Bryce.
Okay, so this survey is as of March 1st. Is there anything that happened over the course of March that you think could change farmers' minds at this point to plant more soybeans as compared to what they originally said?
Well, as of right now, I don't really think there'll really be too much in there. Now, what you could end up finding is that if you had a few people that maybe hadn't reached out to their seed dealers to check on their hybrids, and then in a lot of these cases, they'll be going corn on corn, that could change a few items on that. I think the bigger thing that's going to change that number going forward actually is going to be what our weather is going to be like. What I kind of think we could see is that ultimately if we have a really open spring, and the way it's setting up, we don't know yet how it's going to go, but if we do have a really open spring and we really get stuff planting really under good conditions, then that would really mean that we'd probably see a few more acres of corn and even maybe a few less acres on the soybean side. But I think it's going to be more based on the spring and the weather, Bryce.
The other report that came out from USDA is the quarterly stocks. As you digest all of the information, because there is a lot nationwide, plus a state-by-state breakdown of where various commodities are, whether at the farm level storage or in commercial. What are you trying to glean from those reports, and what stood out to you?
Yeah, there's really two things that we always look at as we dig into the quarterly stocks numbers. What we're looking for is we're looking for confirmation on USDA's really demand numbers to say, are we on pace to hit where their numbers are? And what was interesting, at 8.151 billion bushels on the corn side, when we compare that to last year, that's down 201 million bushels. Came in really close to what the analyst estimates are. In our opinion, what that means is that we know that export sales are ahead of pace. We know that of what USDA thinks we'll have for demand. We know that the ethanol production is ahead of pace. So overall, that for us means that I think down the road we'll see some tightening of stocks additionally in future WASDE reports down the road. As you dig into the soybean side, came in at 1.91 billion. Now that was up 65 million bushels from last year. Not really too big of a surprise. Some of the surprises though that really do stand out as you dig into the state numbers. I'll give you an example here for Nebraska. Nebraska's actually got 135 million more bushels of corn in all positions than we would have had last year. That's up over 16%. And the bigger ones over on the soybean side, as we take a look at that, we're up almost 24 million bushels, which is 20% from where it would have been last year. And that's just looking at where stocks were as of March 1st. Now, how we use the information from the state level, that gives us a good idea to kind of how we watch basis in the different areas, Bryce.
So a lot of, we'll just assume, unmarketed grain still in storage that farmers need to move here, right? Am I reading what you're saying correctly?
Yeah, there definitely is, but there's a big difference compared to last year. The difference that we find is that the stocks that are actually on farm are actually pretty comparable. The additional stocks are actually off farm and in the commercial hands. Doesn't mean that they've physically been sold already, but they're in their hands. What that really means is that the farmer, when we had that price run up, I think they moved quite a few bushels. That makes us a little bit more optimistic about what basis could be as we go into April, May, and then on out into June and July.
Okay, let's continue that theme of looking big picture. Based on these assumptions, the prospective plantings report plus what's available in the quarterly stocks report, what kind of prices could we be looking at here? We look a couple months out, but even bigger picture when we come out to the fall.
Yeah, what we always like to do is once we get the quarterly stocks numbers, and in particular once we get the planting intentions, then we like to take those numbers, go ahead and plug them into some balance sheets. First thing I want to really look at is that what would we expect if we ended up having acres as they were forecasted and we end up having just average weather. Nothing special, just average weather. If we look on out to where we'd be at harvest time and we dig in and starting first on corn, the corn number would suggest, and we'll take the ending stock number, which would be around 2 billion bushels. We divide that by the demand and we get a stocks to use percentage of about 13.8%. When we take that 13.8% and look at the October WSDA report and say what would we expect for a price, that would bring us in right around the $4 level. So that gives us an idea. Now, does that mean we should go to $4 today? No, of course not. We've still got to factor in what's going on for weather here in the U.S., how many acres actually get put in, also what's going on in South America also we have to take into account. Then we come on over to the soybean side. Because we're pulling acres back on soybeans, that really does get quite interesting. And really some of our first estimations would bring us that there'd be ending stocks of around 290 million bushels. That'd give us an ending stock percentage or stocks to use percentage of about 6.5%. Surprisingly, that would give us a price of about $11.50 come harvest time.